I beat a 2700 rated Grandmaster on LeeChess.org using the new Nakhmanson Gambit, and this is how I did it. I played e4, e5, bishop to c4, and in the opening phase, this is the move order that I prefer to use to get here, but you could also get here as long as you can get to the Scotch Gambit. So maybe if you play knight to f3 or even pawn to d4, you're still going to be able to get this variation that I'm going to show you. My opponent played knight to f6, and here is where I play d4. And the reason I choose this particular move order is because, one, a lot of people mess up and just take this pawn with a knight, which is not a particularly good move. And two, after e takes, I can play knight f3 and invite my opponents into playing an Urasov Gambit. And that's what I'm hoping to play. I want them to take my pawn so that I can do this and I can try to get a major initiative going right away. And that's one of the gambits that I like to play. But okay, my opponent plays knight to c6, which is the main line. Very good move. Definitely nothing wrong with it. He's just, trying to keep a little bit more protection of this d4 pawn, develops a piece. It's fantastic. I get castled, and now he takes on e4. So we've gotten to the main line of the Scotch Gambit, and to be entirely honest, I had to make a huge decision here because it's not every day that I get to play somebody that is this high rated. This is a golden opportunity, and I don't want to squander it. I'm playing somebody that is probably out of my league. I shouldn't be able to win. This is going to be a very, very tough game. And I didn't know, should I play knight to c3 here? This is the Nakhmanson Gambit. This is the greatest gambit of all time. This is my favorite. This is what I love to do. But I've also been recently studying the new Nakhmanson Gambit, and I had to make a choice, and I decided instead of playing knight to c3, I would play rook to e1, attacking the knight, and after pawn to d5, protecting the knight, attacking my bishop, I would not move my bishop, but I would instead play knight to c3 here on move 7. And this is what I've been calling the new Nakhmanson Gambit, although I think some astute people have noticed, even though I said this opening doesn't have a name, it actually is called the Canal Variation, it turns out. So whatever you want to call it, new Nakhmanson or the Canal Variation, this is what we're talking about. This is the opening that I played. This is what we got going on. And this gets very complicated very quickly, so I'm going to have to make a future video where I break it down, so please make sure you subscribe if you want to see that video. But it gets insanely complicated very quickly, because black has a lot of options already. You can take the bishop, you can take the knight, you can even play this third option, and I got the database here so you can see how popular everything is. You can play this third option of bishop to e6. There's like all sorts of moves that you might need to be ready for, and it always leads to some crazy captures in the center, and you kind of got to know a little bit about what you're doing. And in this game, my opponent played d takes c3, which I do believe is the strongest way for black to continue. And from here, I took on d5, and I have removed the main defender of this knight, and now I'm ready to capture this knight back. And black has an option here. You can try to hold on to the knight forever and play pawn to f5, which I've covered in a previous video, but definitely it does come with some risks for black, even though the computer thinks this is a viable way for black to continue. It does seem a little bit risky because you're moving your f-pawn, you haven't castled, you are a little bit behind in development with black, and it does lead to a lot of fun and interesting chess. Or black can adopt strategy number 2, which is to develop one of the bishops, give the knight back, who cares, you're still up a pawn, accelerate your development, try to get castled a little bit faster. Those are the two logical ways for black to continue. And in this game, my opponent chose the latter plan. He played bishop to e6, which I think is one of the best moves that you can definitely play in this position. And now, I will take a little bit of time to assess what's going on here, because I know it's really complicated, and based on the moves that people have been playing, I know a lot of people are not playing this position right. And the reason for that is simple. You could take this, you could take this, you could take this, you can take this. It's very complicated already. But I have kind of a simple guideline that maybe you can follow if you get yourself into a position like this. And that rule is, you only want to take on c6 and double the pawns if this rook is not connected to the queen. So in this position, I do not want to take here. I want to take this guy. And as a comparison, I can show you why. If instead bishop to e7 were played, in this position, it makes more sense to capture here, because after you take this queen, the rook is not able to recapture. You have to take with either the king or the bishop. King is actually the strongest move. And you can get some position like this, where I think the computer move is to go like this, attack this pawn. The main point is, if you can strand this king, in some line, you can get some pressure, you're always going to have some sort of compensation for the pawn. Now, I'll be 100% honest here too. The computer does assess this as slightly better for black, but as long as you always have a target, and there's always going to be targets on the queen side, there's always going to be ways to come to d4 or maybe c4, depending on the situation. Knight will be hopping in as well. You should always be able to at least get some pressure, and you definitely have compensation here for a pawn, even if it's not quite sufficient enough. And what that means is I knew in this position, when we got back here and my opponent played bishop to e6, I knew that I did not want to take this knight, because if I take here and then I take back this queen, he just takes back with the rook and the king is totally safe, and that makes a lot less sense for me. So because the rook is connected to the queen, I do not double the pawns. I take on e4. One more mistake you can make, because it does seem to happen a lot. Rook takes e4. Here, black actually has a really strong move that I think a lot of players actually miss. And this is kind of like this opening. What you see is everybody is making mistakes, but it's fair enough. It's a very complicated opening. Most players here are actually just playing this, presumably with the idea of getting castled, but black just has a winning move in this position based on the fact that there's this really strong pin going on the d file. So black can just win the game immediately with the move knight to e7, and suddenly the bishop is attacked way too many times. There's a pin on the d file. This is just losing immediately for white. So after this, I want to take the knight. All of this being said, they play bishop e6. You take the knight with your bishop. Okay. And in this position, this is where we get, I guess, our first, or at least for me, it was like the first main surprise, because I knew the move queen takes queen, which I think is one of the strongest ways for black to continue in this position. But my opponent played bishop to b4, and I knew this was a little bit of a sideline, but I knew one move. I knew it was b3. I knew you play pawn b3, and after this, I didn't really know anything. The line I'm a little bit more familiar with is the queen swap, where I think this can get very dangerous for white. And if there is a way of actually testing the viability of this line, it might be this line. It might be takes, f6, where we won't examine it too much now, but the main point is that these moves don't quite work, and white maybe here needs to come up with a fundamentally different approach than anything that's ever happened to try to make this position work. But you are kind of just down a pawn with white, but I think there's still maybe some interesting stuff to explore. But I didn't have to explore that in this game, because my opponent played bishop to b4. I played pawn to b3. He now swapped the queens. I took it back, and he got castled. Now, if I could go back in time, and I could only draw myself 2 arrows, I think I would have gotten a really good position straight out of the opening. And I didn't know what I was doing, so I played this atrocious move, pawn to a3, and it turns out that later in the game this might actually lead to a target, and at least for the beginning part of this middle game here, I do get outplayed by the Grandmaster. But if I could just go back and just let me draw 2 arrows on the board to let me know what I need to do here with white, I would have said knight to g5, bishop to f4. And if you just follow this, it still leads to some crazy complications, but that's all you really need to know. Put the knight on g5, attack the h-pawn, do a double attack, attack this bishop, and you should be doing well. And there's some kind of cool like computer analysis. It gets very tricky. If they do decide to, for example, bring the rook in, which is sensible enough, instead of taking right away on h7, the computer will just suggest it's time to develop your pieces. Just get your piece out, connect your rooks, make sure there's nothing going on the back rank. This is still a threat. You always might be taking this guy, and now you've added in addition the fact that you're attacking on c7. And these lines get kind of like outrageously complicated, but usually they do tend to favor white. So if I could just go back in time and just know knight to g5 is such a good move, maybe I could have gotten a better position out of the opening. But I played pawn to a3. That was my move. And the opponent here surprised me a little bit. I did have this on my radar. Bishop to f4 I was going to play. I never saw knight to g5. I was never threatening to play it because I didn't see it. But he kind of surprised me. He went all the way back to e7, allowing me to play bishop to f4. And I felt pretty good about it. Look, I get to get a little bit of activity. I'm attacking this pawn. He plays rook a to c8. I'm thinking, okay, still a pawn down, but you know, he's a little bit tied up. My pieces are a little bit more active. This bishop is looking very nice. This bishop has some targets. All right, I'm feeling okay. Rook to d3. I just want to maybe take this back. I would like to be able to double. But now after this move, I start to realize like, uh-oh, I would like to be able to double, But then my A pawn is going to be hanging, and now I can kind of see, like, oh, I'm a dummy. I never should have played A3 now that, like, I can't move my rook. I knew my bishop was going to F4, and if I move my rook, I just made a target for him. So I played B4, which can't possibly be right, because now it gives him time to take this. I take back. I'm going to hide this here so we can't get any sneak peeks. And now he finally plays H6, preventing me from doing the move that I should be doing this whole time, but I never saw it. So really, he didn't have to. I never would have seen it. But he plays a great move, H6. I put the bishop back on E4. I liked what the bishop was doing. The bishop is doing kind of an excellent job. I'm trying to say I'm down a pawn, but at least I got these bishops, and I'm just aimed at your pawns, and I'm trying to make it very difficult for you to develop your pieces. Now he plays bishop to F6. I bring the rook in, and he just plays A6. So he's going a little bit slow, but that's totally fair. Makes a lot of sense. Now I don't have this additional option of playing pawn to B5. I play H3, just, you know, in style. He's waiting, I'm waiting. But I kind of almost go wrong here. After G5, I put my bishop back, and he's actually working towards a really dangerous plan, because now he sneakily goes back to G7, and I don't suspect very much. I'm not like, okay, he's just, you know, consolidating. He's grabbed a little bit of space. He's just tucking his bishop back. Nothing's happening. We're just kind of randomly maneuvering. But after king to H2, he plays pawn to F5, and I'm like, uh-oh, I get it now. It was trying to attack my bishop, and then he's going to try to trap in my bishop on G3, like, uh-oh. And it almost works for black, but I'm very fortunate that I can take here, and after the recapture, play bishop to E5. And in this way, I avoid getting my bishop trapped. And we get to this very interesting endgame. He goes here. I take. He takes back. I play rook to D3. And now I'm feeling pretty confident that I'm going to win my pawn back. If he ever takes me, I'm going to be able to take back. So that's good. And what I'm going to hope for, and this is kind of what you're working towards every time you play these kinds of positions as white, you're always hoping to get a better endgame. Like on the queen side in particular, this is where the structural differences are. I want to get a better endgame where potentially I'm at rook on C3. That's some serious stuff. That's a good piece. He goes here. I grab the pawn. He goes over. I go here. And I just want to start winning some of these pawns on the queen side. He comes in. I protect my F pawn. He goes here. I take a pawn. Look at that. I've now up a pawn all of a sudden out of nowhere. Now, black is super active, so this is probably all a draw. He's able to win this guy. I move back, a slightly tactical move. Like if you take me, I take you. So a little mini tactic. He moves the bishop away. I attack the rook, and I'm hoping to perhaps post my knight up somewhere where I can start taking something else. He attacks my pawn. I move the knight. He goes here. I take a pawn. Look at this. I'm up a pawn yet again. And I believe it's here that he does make some sort of mistake. Although I can't even honestly remember. I think here it's like rook c5 and suddenly I have some massive attack. But I go here first. Then here, I got two passed pawns. Look at this. All I got to do is not mess this up, not get checkmated. And I should be able to win. However, at some point here, the clock becomes a serious issue. I go back. He pushes. He wants to play here. He wants to put the pawn on G3 and try to deliver a back rank checkmate. I give a check first. Then I take. Then I go back. But he shuts the door. I got to go back to make sure I'm not getting back rank checkmated. But I'm still 2 pawns up. He comes in. I move over. He's attacking my knight, and I'm kind of slipping here. The knight is the thing that's defending this pawn. So I give another check. I move away. But now, at some point, he's able to get a little bit closer, and I just blunder a pawn. There it is. This is the point where I just kind of mess up. I panic. Time is ticking, and it gets really sloppy. And I guess it doesn't show the time situation here on this board. But I just throw a pawn away. Okay, and that's kind of, disgusting. I would just kind of blundered a pawn. Okay, we're hopping back and forth. I lost my pawns. Now it's black that is almost threatening to be better here because I got to keep my rook on the back rank. But really nothing too much should be happening. We're just hopping around. We're playing a little footsie. Time is ticking. We got to make some moves. We're hopping. Then he plays bishop to h3. And I believe that we're still in draw territory. But I take this. He takes back. I go here. I got to kind of keep his king out. I'm trying to keep the king out. I go here. I want to play for a win. I could have gone here. I could have tried to make a draw. I want to play for a win. We get to this position. Now, you will know that time is a serious, serious issue when we eventually get to here, and I have this move available to me. I could have just taken this, but I like pre-moved. I went fast. But after here, I did see the best move. I went here, attacking the king, attacking the rook. Now I take here. He takes back. I go here. And now I am super duper mega ultimately winning. Look at all these moves that are super duper mega winning. We both had 0.1 seconds. We both have 0.1 seconds. I just panicked. I took here knowing that this would be a draw and I couldn't calculate anything and there's no time. But obviously I just move and I win. This was not like a dirty, haha, you got 0.1 seconds. You're not even going to have time to take me back. But if he had, it would have been a draw. So this was kind of, one embarrassing mistake with 0 time left. But that's how I defeated a 2700 with a new Nakhmanson Gambit. And if you like it, please do subscribe. Bye.
If you're feeling trapped like a queen, no blunders, only sacrificing see. Well, you may have the blues. Never be a chicken when you lose.